Okay. So first on the ticket today is Greg Stubbe, and I'm just going to share a little info with you about him. Greg lives in Sarasota. He is an attorney. His wife is Jennifer, and his children, he's got one child, Ethan. He was educated at the University of Florida, where he got a BS in animal science. Then he went on to study agricultural law with a minor, and he got his Juris Doctorate as well. He was born May 19th, 1978, here in Bradenton, Florida. And his father, I think everybody knows, is the sheriff of Manatee County. So I'd like to welcome Greg up here.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for all being here today. What I'll do quickly, since I'd like to more open it up for questions that you guys have on specific policy issues and address whatever questions you might have, what I'd like to do is tell you what committees I sit on, what those committees do, and then what are some of the bills that I worked on this year, because a lot of people don't necessarily know the types of things that we're involved with when we go up for session. Committee weeks are actually going to start in September this year, so we're going to have an opportunity to get a real jump start on the committee process, and these committees will start meeting in September. So I currently serve as vice chair of the Business and Professional Regulation Subcommittee. So anything and everything having to do with businesses or that can be regulated go through that committee. And believe it or not, we even regulate boxing and MMA fighting in the state of Florida. So we had a boxing and MMA bill up this year, which I learned more about that sport than I ever knew I would ever know. But that's some of the things that we deal with in business and professional regs. I'm also vice chairman of Health Innovation Subcommittee. Health Innovation Subcommittee deals with health policy issues. Originally, at the beginning of session, they had thought that we would deal with the Medicaid expansion issue and how we as a state, from a policy perspective, was going to deal with that. Ultimately, the Speaker and the Senate President decided to create an entire committee just to address that issue. It was the PPACA committee. So I sit as Vice Chair of Health Innovation, so anything policy related as it relates to health care in our state goes through that committee. And the assignments just came out again. I'm, again, vice chair of both those committees. They came out actually this morning. I also serve on the Full Appropriations Committee. It's a real honor to serve on that committee. I'm a sophomore, and there's only probably 3 sophomores that serve on the Full Appropriations Committee. We appropriate the entire state of Florida budget. This year was $74 billion. The last 2 years I served on healthcare subappropes. So I dealt with the healthcare budget, which is the largest subcommittee budget at the state level, but being on the appropriations, the Full Appropriations Committee as a sophomore is a very rewarding experience because you get to be involved in a lot of the policy and decision making as it relates to our full state budget. So everything, justice, healthcare, anything that we appropriate at the state level, I get to be involved in. So that's a great thing for our area, and it's a great thing to have some influence on the decisions that are being made at the appropriations level. I also serve on regulatory affairs, the full Regulatory Affairs Committee. Regulatory Affairs addresses anything that is regulatory in nature. So insurance is a great example. We had a lot of insurance bills this year. We had the Citizens Bill in the House. We had a lot of other property insurance related bills. So all those insurance related bills would go through the full Regulatory Affairs Committee. So those are the committees that I sit on. I'll tell you, I had 6 bills that I filed this year. 3 of them passed and were signed by the governor. And then 2 of them were passed in the House and didn't make it through the Senate. The one bill that was recently just signed by the governor decided to have a specific bill signing ceremony for the public-private partnership bill in Miami. That was last week or the week before. He signed that. He signed it in June, and then we had a ceremonial bill signing in Miami. What that bill did was allow public-private partnerships to be recognized at the state level as a way to fund infrastructure projects. So if Manatee County wants to build, let's just say, a parking garage, and they want to do it through a public-private partnership, instead of spending your tax dollars to build that project, it allows an investor, a third-party investor, to come in and fund the project financially, do a comprehensive agreement with the public entity. Taxpayers don't have to pay for the project. The public gets an infrastructure piece that they wouldn't otherwise get at the time that they're getting it. It creates jobs in your community, and it's a win-win for all involved. So it was a very well-supported bill. It was unanimously passed in the Senate, and it was almost unanimously passed in the House. We had like 4 no votes in the House. So that was one of the things that actually took up a lot of time, because anything that is a public entity in the state of Florida qualifies to be able to take part in these P3s. So your public hospitals, your cities, your counties, your municipalities, anything that's your colleges and universities are going to utilize this extensively because of the lack of PICO funding, capital outlay funding for education in the state of Florida. So that was one of the things I worked on. I also did the Fish and Wildlife Commission's package bill, which had a lot of veteran components in it. We reduced and eliminated licenses for hunting and fishing for our disabled veterans in the state of Florida. I also did a fraudulent veterans org bill. You may have heard a little bit about this in the paper. There was this allied veterans group in Jacksonville that actually raised $320 million in the name of veterans. They raised it saying that they were raising it for veterans. They were going to spend it on veterans and their family. Do you know how much of that $320 million actually went to veterans? Oh, not that bad, but $2 million out of $320 million actually went to veterans and their families. And believe it or not, I had this bill filed before that scandal hit the papers and became public. What my bill did is made that a crime. Right prior to my bill, it actually wasn't a crime to stand on a street corner with a uniform on and say you're a veteran of the United States Army or the Marine Corps and collect money saying that you're going to raise that money for veterans and then keep it for yourself. Believe it or not, that wasn't a crime until July 1st of this year. So I did a bill, and I actually got the idea of the bill driving around in Sarasota and seeing these gentlemen. I served, to give you a little background, I served in the military for 5 years, active duty, deployed to Iraq, and so I can tell the difference between someone properly wearing a uniform and somebody just going down to the store and throwing a uniform on. I'd see these people on the side of the road collecting money with just ACUs on, with no name plates, no patch insignia, no unit patch. And you always wondered, well, are these people really raising money for veterans and spending it on their families and veterans, or are they not? So we did that. We filed that legislation actually before the scandal hit, and then it specifically addressed what had occurred in that scandal. So now it's a crime, it's a criminal offense to raise money on behalf of veterans or their families and not actually be serving veterans and their families. It's also a violation of the Unfair and Deceptive Trade Practice Act, so that if you're doing that, you can also be sued for damages because of whatever you have done. And in my bill, I actually had a requirement to register with the Department of Agriculture in order to have some type of regulatory catch on these organizations. That part didn't make it in the Senate bill, and in the last ends of session, we took the Senate language to make sure we got something passed. So I was very proud of that legislation, because I think it's important that when there's individuals out there and organizations out there saying that they're raising money for veterans and their families, that the money actually goes there. One other thing that bill did was it required that 51% or more of the money they raise has to go directly to veterans, their families, or service for veterans organizations. Prior to now, there was no requirement for that. In the House language, I actually had 75% was my number, because obviously there's going to be money for non-for-profits to pay for administrative costs and that sort of things. But the Senate language had 50%, so we had to run with it at the end of session. It's one of the fun things of dealing with the process that we have, because we have a bicameral legislature in the Senate and the House. So those are some of the things I worked on that passed and were signed into law. One of the things that was very important to me that I worked on that made it through the House process, we didn't take a floor vote on it because it wasn't moving in the Senate, was my school safety legislation. After the atrocities that occurred in Connecticut, I started doing some research in Florida as to the safety situation for our children, especially elementary school children in the state of Florida. And I found that even here in Manatee and Sarasota County, not a single elementary school in Manatee or Sarasota County has a school resource officer at it, not one. And because of the concealed permit statute, that the way it is in the state of Florida, I, as a concealed permit carrier and with a military background, I cannot walk onto any school premises in the state of Florida with my concealed firearm. So we have a situation where you have schools with no school resource officer. I, as a law-abiding citizen with a concealed permit and training, cannot go onto school property with my concealed firearm, and there's nobody there that, if God forbid an atrocity were to occur, to be able to respond to our children. Do you know what the response time is in Manatee County for any type of crime? How long it takes a deputy to get there? 6 to 11 minutes on average. I live in rural Sarasota County. My house was burglarized. Took them 45 minutes to get out there. Okay? This is the facts. Department of Education and the FBI did a study in 2001 after Columbine, and that study revealed that a majority of these incidences, or a large number of these incidents, occur in less than 6 minutes. More than half of them occur in less than 15 minutes, and the majority of them are resolved by someone other than law enforcement. So an individual like myself that runs back out to his car to get his firearm, or that is able to cease whatever the gunman is doing at the time. And these are all active shooter type situations. So with those facts, knowing that most of them occur in 6 minutes, over half of them occur in less than 15 minutes, and we don't have a single school resource officer at most of our, if not all of our elementary schools in the state of Florida. If a gunman were to walk on any campus and do the things that he did in Connecticut, we would have an atrocity in the state of Florida. All because law-abiding citizens who have proper training are prevented by law from carrying their firearm on school grounds. So I came up with a very tailored bill that would allow principals to designate employees of their school who have gone through 40 hours of security guard training, 36 hours of firearms training, and 4 hours of firearms training per year. So every year they would have to re-qualify with their handgun. And then it's permissive. So if the principal doesn't want to do it, you know, if they're in Miami-Dade County and they have a school resource officer and they don't want to appoint anybody, they don't have to. But if they're in Myakka City, in Myakka Elementary, and they know it'll be 45 minutes before a deputy gets out there, that principal can designate himself or someone at the school that has gone through the training to be able to carry a concealed firearm at the school during their time of employment. It passed through 2 House committees. In my first House committee, I had 2 Democrats who were teachers that actually voted for the bill because they felt like there is a real void here in our state that needs to be addressed. There are 8 other states in our country that allow concealed permit carrier holders to carry on school grounds. Hawaii is one of them. I lived in Hawaii for 3 years when I was stationed there in the military. There's 1 Republican in the House in Hawaii. And Hawaii allows concealed permit carrier holders to carry on school grounds. How many shootings have happened in Hawaii? None. One of the arguments that has been posed to me was that, well, if we allow this, then what if something happens and they drop the gun or a kid gets a hold of the gun? Out of those 8 states that have had this long before Connecticut, there has not been a single incident of that occurring anywhere in our country. So that's something that's been very important to me. We made it through 2 House committees. It didn't get a hearing in the Senate, but I will assure you, I'm working on it now. It's already in drafting. I will be doing that bill again this year. The Speaker of the House has actually given me his assurance that he's supportive of it, and he will continue to allow committee meetings on that issue. So I hope we can get it through the House this year, and hopefully the Senate with some minor tweaks. We're going to add some more training to make sure that anybody that would be designated would also have almost the exact same training as a school resource officer as it relates to active shooters. And the training that we're going to create will be specific to school safety, so lockdown drills and those types of things. Do you know, and this, I know I'm probably taking more time than I should, but do you know how many times schools in the state of Florida are required by statute to have fire drills? 10 times a year, they're required by statute. How many kids have died by a fire in our country, in our history of our country? 0. How many shooting drills do they have in an active shooter type situation are they required by law to do, even without firearms, but lockdown drills? Like active shooter comes in the door, teachers do a lockdown drill, lock your doors, get your kids down, and move them to a place where they can be safe. 0. There's no requirement. So we're going to put that requirement in the bill too, because we think that that's important. And how many active shooting incidences have we had occurred on colleges and schools? Quite a few. So that's something that's important to me, and I'll continue to work on. And at this point, I'll let Representative Boyd, my elder statesman, take the podium. And thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Representative Stubbe. We appreciate it. Our next esteemed guest is Representative Jim Boyd. I think we all know Jim. Jim lives in Bradenton. His occupation is in insurance and real estate, which is fantastic. His wife is Sandy. He has children, Ainsley and Austin. He was educated at MCC and then at Florida State, and he was born, I don't know. Yeah, we'll just gloss over that one there. A thing that I learned recently about Representative Boyd was that his grandfather was also in the House of Representatives back in 1941, and his uncle as well, which I just learned now, which is fantastic. So that's good. So let's all welcome Jim Boyd. Thank you.
Thanks, James. As I tell people, I'm in Tallahassee because they say, hey, boy, that name's familiar. You know, blah, blah, I know you make a connection. I see I'm the rogue Republican in the family. All my family, and I was too for quite a number of years, a Democrat back when Democrats were, you know, kind of a little more conservative, a little more reasonable. And in the South, you almost had to be a Democrat if you were going to vote most of the elections. So, but thanks for having me, and thanks for fitting me in. I was supposed to be out of town, and I got back, and I was happy that you guys had still room so I could come over. So. It's hard following, you know, Superman here as the elder statesman, but I'll do my best. The reality is we've got a really good delegation, and I was hoping that Senator Galvano would be here tonight. I think his schedule didn't allow him to get here, but we've got a very good delegation that really cares about our community, and we work really well together. I might be a little older than Greg, but we still get along great, and we work well together. So I think that's only good for not just our party, but for the system in Tallahassee and for what's good. A little bit about what I did this past year, and then we'll save as much time as we can for questions because that's probably more important to you. This year, I was asked by the Speaker to be chairman of Ethics, Elections, and Campaign Finance Reform, and the committee is Ethics and Elections Committee. And so I said when he called me, it was the Sunday after the Florida State game in Tallahassee. I was driving home, and he called me, and I said, well, he said, let me run this idea by you, or pitch an idea, and told me what he wanted me to do. And I said, well, I guess you just didn't enjoy, or you didn't have enough of watching me get my rear end kicked during the PIP and the automobile insurance debate the year before that we were able to pass. So if you want to send me into the arena again, I guess I'm willing. So, but it was a great experience and a great honor to be chairman of that committee. It was the Speaker's initiative, it was the Senate President's initiative, and it was something that was good for Florida, which is even more important. And we were able to pass, I think, significant reform to elections, ethics, and campaign finance. It was a bipartisan bill. We worked very well together with our colleagues on the other side of the aisle. And in the final vote in the House on the elections bill, it was all but one negative vote. I mean, we had a 100%, or well, 99% vote, one negative vote, and that was from a fellow Republican that just had a problem for a lot of reasons with anything that had to do with elections reform. So that was a very good bill that we passed, and excited to see the benefits of that as we play out in future elections. So that was an honor to be involved in that. The other things, like Representative Stubbe, we had other bills that I was able to carry. I had a manufacturing bill that streamlines the manufacturing process. It's a local county ordinance that is adopted kind of after a statewide model. Counties can opt in or opt out and be deciding on their own communities what's important to them. They can do it or not do it. Our county's a leader in that. Manatee County actually helped us get the bill passed. So that enjoyed broad support as well. Unfortunately, we were going to have a bill signing. Representative Stubbe talked about a bill signing in Miami a couple weeks ago. We were supposed to have a bill signing in Bradenton at Tropicana the Friday morning. That I think your bill was signed Friday afternoon, and unfortunately that got switched around and we weren't able to do it. But I was excited that the governor was going to come here and sign the bill and at Tropicana, but unfortunately those plans changed. But nonetheless, it's still a good bill that is in place now, and it'll help encourage manufacturers to come to Florida, which is good for all of us. A couple of other things I worked on: a fire marshal's bill for the CFO that kind of streamlined a lot of the archaic old fire marshal standards, greater public safety, and greater standards for firemen and first responders. And everybody in the process was collaborative and supportive of that. So that was another good thing to do for Florida. And then I had a insurance bill, a small insurance bill that dealt with commercial rates and forms, and essentially the real complicated issue, but it's really very simple at the bottom line, and that is the insurance commissioner can authorize rate review after and form review after a bill's in play. I mean, after a company files it. So in other words, they can file it, use it, and then he does his review, and if it isn't appropriate, he can pull it out. Well, he can do that by executive order, but he said, look, I've got lots of these that I'm doing. Can't you make it where it's in statute that it happens, and then if I have a problem with it, I can still pull it back and deal with it? And so we passed that bill and allowed him that flexibility. It actually acts as a greater speed to market issue with insurance companies. Hopefully it'll make the process a little bit smoother and allow some more entrance into the market. So that was kind of what I worked on. The bigger issues as far as our legislature, and I think Representative Stubbe mentioned some of them, but education, we were able to fund another $2 billion to education, which is good. There was a lot of, for a change, we had a surplus budget versus a deficit. Our first 2 years in office, we had a $6 billion cumulative budget deficit, which was very tough to deal with, especially as freshmen, that how do you make these tough decisions that, you know, who gets what, and everybody suffered, but we were able to be somewhat judicious about that. But we were able to refund this year some of the things that we had to cut back on the prior 2 years, which we, I think, both feel good about. And also continuing to look at regulation and what government requires of businesses and families in order to live and work and play in Florida. We're still looking at reducing needless regulations. I think since we've been there, Greg, you may have the exact number, but it's been over 2,000 regulations that we were able to reduce or eliminate just based on duplicity or a variety of things that just didn't make sense. So we're very thankful about that. And as well, under the governor and the legislature's leadership, we've created close to 300,000 new jobs in 3 years now. So that's good for Florida, and that's good for families. And as you know, as you probably have seen, Governor Scott and Governor Perry have had this honest to God, neck and neck, slug it out competition on who's the best state for jobs and growth and development. And we're still a second, but we're a real close behind the leader, which has been Texas. So I don't think any of us are going to give up until we're number one in the state. And good things are really happening. Good things are coming to Florida, and you've seen a lot of the new businesses with Hertz and with Amazon and a number of other companies that are expanding or, in fact, entirety moving to Florida. That's very good for us. So it's been a great privilege to serve. This past today, new committee assignments came out for the next year, which is not unusual that the speaker would look at committees and see who maybe a little couple of adjustments here and there. I think, Greg, you're still on the same committees and involved in some really good substantive committee work. I was asked by the speaker to move to government ops as the chair out of elections and ethics, and Jeremy Wallace already tweeted what's going on. Boyd's first 1 year in ethics and elections, and he's out. I mean, the reality is we accomplished what we set out to accomplish in elections and ethics and campaign finance. We want to make sure that's working before we start tinkering with it. It makes some common sense, I hope. And so he asked me to move into government ops, which is a variety of functions around state government and some of those things. So I'm excited for a new challenge. The gal that's taking over elections committee is a good friend of ours, Kathleen Pasadomo from Naples. She and Representative Stubbe worked on the foreclosure bill the past couple of years, and were able to get that through. So she's a great lady and a good friend, and she's going to be a good chairman of ethics and elections. There'll be some things coming through that are important to the state, but the big stuff we pretty much feel like we've accomplished. So that's kind of where we are. I know you wanted to ask some questions on Stand Your Ground, Jesse Jackson, and I hit Jobs a little bit, but I saw Jesse, God bless him, on the way out of the house on the news, and so I know a little bit about what he said recently, but I've been kind of immersed in business and other things, but I'll do our best, and I know Greg's good on his feet too, so we'll do our best to answer whatever questions, and if you want me to stay and Greg come up, or however you want to.
Now, the best format for this would be perhaps to have the person who's asking the question come to the mic and ask the question, and then both representatives get to respond, or we want to do it casually and informally, and everybody just kind of sit at the tables and we just talk.
We're fine.
How are you?
Until the food comes in, I'm sitting down.
Okay, great. Well, I'll ask the first question since I'm here. It's reported that this year Florida will become the third most populous state in the country, surpassing New York. And seeing as how there's an absolute dearth of housing already, and Florida continues to grow exponentially, my question involves the Long Bar Point project here in Manatee County. If you guys aren't familiar with that, there's a project to redevelop all the old gladiola fields, kind of Cortez and 75th south towards Sarasota Bay. It's kind of a heated debate going between the conservationists, the environmentalists, the people who want to keep the character of Manatee County the same. And then there's also the perspective from the developers, from the realtors, for the need for more housing and the need for more a higher tax base. and I was curious if you guys had any input on that. And I'm the public policy chairman for the Manatee Association of Realtors this year, so this hits home for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'll speak to it briefly, and Representative Stubbe can follow me. Fortunately, that's a county issue. It's a county commission issue. I say that a little bit tongue-in-cheek. That's not something that's under our purview, but I think there are processes in place to address the issues. They've got to get environmental approval. They've got to get a variety of approvals in order to do the project. I've seen the project just kind of casually, the schematics and the concept. I think it's from that standpoint, it's a great concept. It's a really cool thing for Manatee County, and it gives us, world-class hotels, world-class living, and the like. All that said, they've got to go through the process of getting county commission approval. It has to go through the state Department of Environmental Protection and the like, and make sure that everything is in sync and in line with rules and regulations there to protect the quality of life, to protect the environment and the like. So I trust the process. I think that will work, depending on what the county does. I think there's a hearing next week on it. This week? Next Tuesday. That's a county commission's decision, I think, where it goes from there. But I know the processes are in place in the state level to look at the issues that are important. And there's pros and cons, and there's opponents and there's proponents, of the project. But I would say to everybody that I think the state, the county, and then the state government is equipped to handle those issues and to address those issues and to make sure that we protect the environment and look out for what's important to not just Manatee County, but for the state of Florida with any project we do, whether it be Longbar Point or an expansion of this marina, this beautiful marina that we're sitting in, or anything else. So that process is in place. I trust the process, and I think the next couple of weeks will kind of bear out where that goes from here. And the attorney may have a little more to add to that.
I think Representative Boyd said it well. I think one of the things I would like to add is what your legislature in the state has done to encourage small business growth and economic development in our community. I think it was our first or our second year, we did a huge growth management bill that deregulated a lot of the processes that were in place that were impediments to growth in our community and to growth in small businesses. So the state has really set us up to be able to take advantage of whatever projects they are, but they have to go through individual counties and municipalities approval process, and I can't really comment on how that process is or what the commissioners will or will not do, and I don't know enough of the details of the plan and what changes are going to have to be made. But I will tell you this, your state and the legislature has been very proactive to deregulate, to ensure that growth and small businesses can grow in our community.
Well, I'm not the healthcare expert. I am an insurance guy, but a lot of it depends on the plan. If you're in an individual plan, you shouldn't have. There's not that type of a mandate. It shouldn't be. That's not a state. There are some state mandates. There's 42 or 43 of them with respect to healthcare, but that's more for the group plans and things that are added on there. If you're over a certain number of employees, federally, by federal law, you have to provide maternity coverage and the like. But as an individual, if I were going out to buy a health insurance plan for myself, to my knowledge, you shouldn't be required to provide, let's say, maternity coverage. Now, with affordable health care, which is anything but affordable, lots of things might change if that continues on the path that it's on. But without knowing specifics, it's hard to address it. But in general, I think the state and our legislature, our conservative caucus is, don't mandate things that people should choose themselves. Federal government, unfortunately, on the bigger picture and on the bigger groups are mandating some certain things, and that are already in place. And then with affordable health care, it may add to those. So I could talk to you a little bit maybe offline about specifics, but that's kind of
Medicaid. Let me give you. There's three different positions, because the governor had a position that then he changed, and then the Senate had a very specific position, and then we had a position in the House. The governor's position initially was to refuse any of the federal money. He changed that, I think, right before session, and it said that now he wanted to accept all the federal money as it related to the Obamacare. In the House, I'll tell you what the House's position was on Medicaid. And let me give you a little bit background so you can kind of understand. I sat on healthcare appropriations for my first 2 years and then sit on the full appropriations committee now. Do you know how much just Medicaid is in the state of Florida right now, roughly? $20 billion just for Medicaid. And that is what we are required by law, federal law, to pay out for Medicaid. Correct. Yeah. So we in the House did not want to expand Medicaid because we knew that we would be expanding a program that then would make a huge liability in our state budget and for our coffers, and that we would be required to pay. Now, the Obamacare legislation says that in the first 3 years that the federal government's going to pay 90% of it. Okay, well, what happens after those first 3 years? Nobody knows. So the House's position was, if we were to take that money, expand Medicaid pursuant to Obamacare, in 4 years, the numbers that we would see of the people that would be eligible for Medicaid, and then the federal government's now not paying it or liable to pay it, we would have to pick up that. And if you look at the numbers, it's exponential. You go from $10 billion just in the next 3 to 5 years after the feds aren't paying for it. I don't know where you would get that money in the budget unless you raise taxes, which this legislature is not going to do. So we in the House decided that what we would do is take an existing program. It's called the Florida Healthy Choices Program. And what we would do is make the eligibility criteria for that program slightly expanded so that we would capture the most eligible people in our population and the truly indigent population that really need health care, and not expand Medicaid, a government-run program. So our plan is to put these people on actual insurance policies. So if you fall between 100% and 138% of the poverty level, the federal poverty level, you would qualify for the Florida Healthy Family Plan. And if you qualified for that plan, you would pay $25 a month. The other thought process here is people that if you're just in an entitlement program and you're just getting a free health care, you're not really vested in the health care that you're getting. Plus, it's a government-run program. Medicaid's a government-run program and a government-paid program. If we put these people on real insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Aetna, you name the provider, if we put these people on a real insurance plan that they have a small vested interest in, $25 a month, they're actually getting real health care through an insurance that they're paying, not Medicaid. Now, we paid for the difference in that price from the 100% to the 138%, and we also put different populations in that. So a woman who's not married, who has minor children would qualify. So there was a lot of other factors that went in it, but we did all of that and balanced the budget without raising taxes. So that was the plan in the House. The question was, where's that plan now? So we passed that plan in the House. In the Senate's plan was to take a drawdown of some of the federal money. I believe the number was $350 million initially, to expand Medicaid half, if you will. So the governor was full expansion. The Senate was, we'll take a little bit of the federal money and do some expansion on Medicaid. And the House was, we're not expanding Medicaid at all. We're going to put everybody on private insurance through an exchange that qualified through the Florida Healthy Family Choices Plan. And that was what occurred. And that's why nothing was passed. Because you had a Senate that had a position, you had the House that had a position, and our leader, our speaker, and the House was very fervent on the position that we're not going to expand Medicaid. So until there was going to be a compromise on that issue, nothing was going to pass. And Representative Boyd and I have talked about this in other forums. I do think this is an issue that obviously is not going to go away. I think we're going to continue to address it through the committee process in the next coming year. Obama himself, through executive order, has extended the deadline requirements by a year for employers, I believe was one of them. So the feds keep kicking the can down the road, if you will. I don't know what's going to happen in the state of Florida, but here's the great thing about, and this is the only great thing in my opinion, about the Supreme Court upholding the validity of Obamacare. When they did that, they said, okay, feds, you have the ability through the Commerce Clause to do this. But the original part of that bill said that the states were required to do it, and if they didn't do it, they would lose all the federal money. The U.S. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. So if we don't expand Medicaid pursuant to Obamacare, then we're not going to lose our federal match on the current Medicaid program. And that's very important. So that was a good part of the opinion by the U.S. Supreme Court on that issue, so that we are not forced as a state to expand Medicaid. And if we don't expand Medicaid to the way that Obamacare wants us to, then we're not going to lose the federal match on our current Medicaid program. So that's probably a lot more information than you wanted to know about Medicaid, but it's kind of a complex issue. So the question was, if the half sales since tax in Manatee County passed, how would that affect the bill? It wouldn't have had any effect because it's a county issue. And something that's interesting that I'll point out as it relates to that, as I recall, the county was raising the level, the federal poverty level, to 200%. Let me tell you what the numbers are. At 100% of the federal poverty level, you're at $10,000 a year, roughly. I'm approximating, so the number of people out there don't give me a hard time because I'm a lawyer, not a numbers guy. At 138% of the poverty level, you're around $15,000 a year income. So at $200,000 or 200% of the poverty level, you're obviously even north of $15,000, probably in the $20,000 range. You know how much he and I make as a state representative in the state of Florida? $28,000 a year. So we're already getting close at the 200% of the federal poverty level. You know, we're 8,000 from if it's around 20,000. So that was the county's, and the county voted on that. That was a pure county issue, but it would have no effect on the state, and our legislation wouldn't have had any effect on that because it would have been a county indigent care policy that ultimately did not pass. I can't, the question was, do we have an indigent care problem? I don't know the facts on the numbers of whether we do or not. Our Medicaid rolls in the state of Florida, if you don't have an income, you will qualify for Medicaid in the state of Florida, and you will get health care through the Medicaid program. And if you look at the enrollment for Medicaid, even with no expansion whatsoever, it's doing this. It's continuing to go up. So if you are indigent and you don't have health care, one, if you go to an emergency room, they have to treat you by federal law. Two, you qualify for Medicaid because you don't have income. So you're going to get placed on that program, which is why that Medicaid rolls, even without the expansion, are there. So, you know, I don't know, yeah, and Representative Boyd wants to add something on that. But again, I'll stress that was strictly a Manatee County issue.
And just to add to that, answer that question, whether we have an indigent care problem or not, I don't know. The facts are, and I'm not advocating for the tax or against the tax, but the facts are Manatee County sold, I was here, I was born in the hospital actually in 56. That, now I gave it up, how old I am. Yeah, it was a good year, man. I'm an elder statesman. Show me some respect. When they sold the hospital in 84, 85, $45 million or so for the sale of the hospital was put into a fund, and it was required by the purchaser or subsequent owners of the hospital to provide for indigent care in Manatee County. I think, and this is just Jim Boyd's personal opinion, this is no legislative survey or data analysis or anything else, I think the county's done a pretty good job of managing that money for that number of years and providing indigent care for those that can't afford to take care of themselves. The reality is the money is just about gone. 2014, the agreement is up. The end of December of 2014, the agreement is up. So somehow as a community, and I'm part of this community just like you all are, we're going to have to decide, are we into taking care of those that are less fortunate than we are and can't take care of themselves in terms of indigent care? And if we are, how are we going to fund it? Maybe there's a more creative way, maybe there's a better idea, maybe there's more thought certainly more thought perhaps should go into it, but the numbers are, you know, the fund is just about gone, and we're gonna have to do something with it. I remember very well the sale of the hospital and what commitments we made as a county and what commitments the buyer then, which I think was Baptist Health Systems back then, made to the county in terms of that purchase. So what's right for the future, I don't know. I think as a community though, we need to get past this vote. You know, the public spoke, 60-40 is a pretty strong indication. I think we need to decide though as a community what's important to us and how we're going to handle it if it is important to us. And what that looks like, I have no idea, but there is an issue. And then depending on, you know, some people said, well, wait till Obamacare kicks in and that'll cover the problem. If Obamacare full on comes through, maybe it will. I think those are things that yet are to be seen, but I think that's a dialogue. We're not going to be able to, as good responsible leaders and citizens, we're not going to be able to just kick the can down the road and hope it works out. We're going to have to decide how we deal with it. It's a county issue. It's not necessarily a state or legislative issue, but as just a concerned citizen, I think we're going to have that conversation, and I trust everybody will be open to the dialogue, whatever comes. So the question was, what can the Republican Party of Florida do to engage younger people in the process? And Charles, I apologize because METV, Charles Clapsaddle, the best in the world. The one thing he asked us to do was repeat the question. Representative Stubbe remembered it. I guess my elder statesman status allowed me the opportunity to forget it, but so there's the question. That is a very good question because, you know, as a party, we've got to decide what's important to us as a party, not just younger, not just older, but as a party, what's important to us, what, you know, kind of standards we want to adhere to and what stakes we want to put in the ground and what we can't retreat from and what we can negotiate on. And younger people, you know, your clubs are kind of the, I think, the kind of the incubator for getting younger folks involved in the process. Everywhere I speak and from grade school on up, I try to talk to kids and students about their part in the future and what it means for them to be involved in the process. So I think education, I think communication, I think involving them, you know, whether it's clubs at school that, you know, I know high schools and public schools aren't going to allow Young Republicans Club or Young Democrats Club, but so through certain key clubs and some of the different things that are in schools now, just pure leadership. You know, whether you're a Republican or Democrat is your choice. I know we're all Republicans, but just getting involved in the process and being part of it. A lot of the social media, you know, one of the things we learned at our caucus meeting after we had the election, and Greg and I were fortunately reelected, and then some new members. And we had our caucus meeting, and Mike Murphy, who you've probably seen on a lot of the talk shows, and he's a brilliant Republican strategist. He spoke to us for 45 minutes, I think, and I mean, I could have listened to him, I don't know, I could have listened to him like all day. He was that good. And his points were, you know, they beat us on the ground, and a lot of that social media, and a lot of that is hitting young people. But he used a couple examples. He says, you know, they went to Silicon Valley and got all these techies, put them in a cage because they scared the Democratic leadership, and the Democratic leadership scared them. So they put them in there and just let them do what they do. And then the results were an unbelievable ground game, communication, follow-up, surveys, questions, responses. I think you know, I'm speaking for myself, we dropped the ball on a lot of that. So we've got to learn, I think, how to communicate with the younger population of Republicans and teach them through some of that what's important as we move forward. And I think that's a big issue that we need to get our hands around. And then simply, as a party, what's important to us? You know, we've got our Tea Party friends, we've got the Republican Party friends, and my hope, just as a concerned conservative, is we'll all get together and decide what's important. So we're not fighting with each other amongst our parties, the young, the old, the Tea Party, the Republicans, whatever the groups or case or populations may be. We're a unified effort, because I can tell you the other side is unified, they're organized, and they're ready for the fight. And we're gonna lose if we can't mobilize ourselves in a way that's meaningful to everybody, and learn to fight together and learn to reach each other on the grounds that I mean, I'm tweeting, which is crazy because you know, I got almost 800 followers, Greg. I'm not so sure they're following me because of anything of substance. They're just nice people, but we've got to learn to communicate with each other, and certainly with the younger population. I think that's a big part of it. And you may, because you're younger, statesman.
I think I have more than 1,000 followers on Twitter.
You're tweeting longer than I have too.
I think the best way to answer your question is encouraging folks, young Republicans, young individuals, to just get involved, to run for office. I mean, look at Sarasota and Manatee County, and you know, nothing against my elder statesman here, but I'm 35, and I'm probably 20 years younger than most of the members in the delegation. If you look at Sarasota County, there's even a bigger distance in the age of the people on the state level that are elected. And even looking at both Manatee and Sarasota County commissioners, there's not a lot of young folks that are getting out there, that are running for office, that are getting involved in their community, and that's really the biggest thing. And it's tough as a young professional. I'll tell you, you make a lot of personal and financial sacrifices as a young professional to do something like this, and what we get paid at $28,000 a year, and the amount that we spend at least 4 months a year in Tallahassee. And that doesn't include the time here in the district where we're coming to events like this and speaking, meeting with constituents like I did this afternoon in my law office about bills that we may or may not be filing next year. It is a big time commitment, but it is very important for our youth and for our young people and our young professionals to get involved. every time I have the opportunity, and sometimes I even reach out to high schools, to middle schools, to elementary schools, to young groups to come and speak. And when I'm there, I talk about the importance of leadership. I talk about the importance of giving back to your community. One of the things I used to say I was president of my fraternity in college, and one of the things I used to say is, you are only going to get what you put into this organization back to you. So what you put in is what you're going to get back. So if you put a lot of heart and soul into your community, you're going to get that back in reward through benefiting your community. And, there's a lot of people you just look at the voting numbers. City of Sarasota was a great example, the abysmal numbers of people that actually vote. And so it's encouraging this younger generation of folks to get involved in things that are important, like the political process. I can't stress that enough, and every time I go to younger organizations, I stress the importance of kids getting involved in their community. And if you have any type of inkling to run, whatever it is, it could be city commission, it could be county commission, it could be the state level, you need to do it. And how many of you in here have actually participated in a campaign? Have participated, probably most of the people here, because you're here. You're not at home playing Game Boy right now. But it's important to encourage your friends as well, your professional friends that you work with. And you'll hear them complain about, the federal government's doing this, or why did the state legislature do this? Well, maybe you should make an appointment with your legislature and come ask us and come talk to us and get involved in your community. There's so many different ways that you can do it, and I really think that stressing that to our young people today is the most important thing. Representative Boyd talked about all the ways to communicate and try to network better with that younger generation, but I think it's really just encouraging them the benefits of being involved in public service and serving their community. And I'll go back to my military service. I served for 5 years. You know what the percentage of people that serve our armed services are in our country? It's less than 1%. Less than 1% of our country raises their right hand and volunteers. So it's important to encourage those people and embrace those people by supporting them when they do things. When your veterans come home from serving, make sure that you're there and you're supportive of them to encourage people that do those types of things, because that's very important to know that there's people out there that appreciate that less than 1% that go out there and serve us in our community and our country to make our communities a better place. So that's how I would, that's my perception, and try to get that message out as much as you can. Yeah, the question was if we'd be willing to get involved in mentorship programs. I absolutely would, and like I just stated, I take every opportunity to get involved in our young people's activities in our community. And I was involved in athletics in high school, but it wasn't until college that I really realized the impact that public policy can have on people's lives, and that's why I got involved. So communicating that and being a role model for our younger children, the importance of getting involved, no matter what it is, I think is really important. I'd be more than happy to be involved in something like that.
Yeah, and John, thank you. If you got any good ideas, I'd be happy to do it. I love kids. I love having kids around. When the kids come to the Capitol, or kids from young to students to high school to college, it just kind of charges me up. And Sandy and I have had a passion for kids pretty much all of our married life. So absolutely, if you got ideas, I'd love to learn about them and share them with you. Both of us have had interns in our offices in Tallahassee with their college kids, but they come and they sit and learn and work, and we put them to work, and they do good and substantive things for us. So they learn about the process, but to the extent we can get more involved. I'll tell you something real quick, and I think Greg was part of this when he was in high school. FFA is an incredible developer of young people. I mean, the kids that come through that program and come to Tallahassee and talk to us, unbelievable. Every one of those kids is a leader, and I think that's just a program that many ought to emulate and kind of model, because they've got it right. So if we can collaborate with some of the other groups that are doing it right, anything we can do to encourage and support youth, young people, kids, students, I would be thrilled to be part of that.
The question was on Common Core and the involvement of it at the state level in our students. First of all, as an aside, you're not on any education committees. I don't serve on any education committees. So I'm not on any of the committees that would go through these policies and procedures. He's on the education of probes. I will say what you had mentioned, that the Speaker of the House, and I didn't read the letter, and the Senate President did do a joint letter to the Commissioner of Education saying that they have some concerns about Common Core being taught in our schools. And if I can tell you this, if the Senate President and the Speaker of the House feel and passionate enough about something to send a joint letter to the Commissioner of Education, then you can be rested assured that there's probably going to be some action on that issue in our next legislative session, the education committees. I will say this as my personal feeling, and it's kind of like the feds, like you had said, that why is there a federal education department? I actually think it should be completely, as much as we can, pushed to the local level. I think Manatee County should make curriculum decisions for Manatee County. I think Duval County should make.
The only thing I would add to what Representative Stubbe said, I can tell you this legislature, our body, our caucus, is all about parental involvement, all about kids, all about performance, all about education. We fight with the teachers union, and there's some good teachers. Believe me, there's a lot of good teachers in every community. But right, but it's an issue that is important to us. I think we all agree that our kids need to learn to compete, not just with the kids that are graduating from Jacksonville schools or maybe Tennessee schools, but they're competing with kids from Asia and some of the other countries that they're going to have to compete in the global economy. So they need to be prepared. I think we're all in agreement that we need to do what we can to prepare our kids for that. But for federal government to jam down whatever the flavor of the day is, so to speak, I don't think any of us are comfortable with. And to Representative Stubbe's point, I concur that the more we can give local school boards, who are elected by all of us to represent our communities, authority to make those decisions, I think we ought to do it. So I agree. I think this is going to be an issue that'll come up very soon in the next session. And again, neither one of us are on education committees, but we've got our ear to the ground. And Senator Galvano, Chairman of Education or Probst for the Senate, has a big play in that, and I think he's on the same page as we are with that issue. So the question was, what is the state party doing to promote the fact that we're number 2 in the nation in job creation and some of the good metrics that we measure? Honestly, I don't know what the state party's doing so much. I know our caucus, the Republican caucus in the House, I know the Republican caucus in the Senate, I know the governor, the CFO, the Attorney General, the Ag Commissioner, who are all good, solid, conservative Republicans. They're talking about it every chance they get. They're tweeting it, they're emailing it, their newsletters. But under the governor's leadership, the legislature has been a very, very, in our 3 years, very proactive job creation, business development, cut down regulations that are needless or duplicative, and cut down taxes and the things that just burden everybody, and let enterprise work, let families work, and let the market kind of adjust. And we've done I'm very proud of the fact that we've been part of that, because that's been in a very bleak and dismal economy all over the country. We've really made some bold moves, and we're coming back. I mean, we're not out of the woods, and it's not perfect, but we've got a lot to brag about and a lot of good in terms of our economy. So I think, through the party, maybe they're promoting it. I don't know how, Andy, to be honest with you, but I know the rest of us are. I'm putting it in my newsletters. I'm sure Representative Stubbe is. The governor is.
Talks, he's talking.
Yeah, I mean, and I can tell you, this governor, it doesn't matter what time of day it is, what day it is, he's talking to somebody about jobs, somebody about bringing a business to Florida. He's competing with his colleagues around the country. He brags about it, and he boasts about it, and I love that. I mean, I love that competitive spirit that what can we do to get Hertz to come from New Jersey, where they've been since they incepted, to Fort Myers or to Estero. I mean, that's huge. Amazon bringing, big numbers of people and facilities here. And the list just goes on and on. So there's a lot of good that's coming. And business, small business, is the backbone of our economy, and what helps us all do what we do and raise our families and everything else. So there's a lot of good going on. Certainly we need to promote it more. And if you, again, not to put it back in your lap, but if y'all have ideas on how we could, or maybe we're not doing, we'd love to hear them. You may want to add to that.
Quickly, I'll tell you how important those issues were to our legislature. Our first 2 years, we as a body changed the rules in the House so that a repealer bill to repeal law or a duplicative regulation in the state of Florida did not count towards one of your 6 bill slots. So members could file as many genuine repealer bills as they wanted to, and that resulted in almost 1,800 deregulations of our state statute. And if you actually, as a lawyer, I see the different years of statute, and for years they were growing. If you look at the statutes, 1998 is this big, and then it's 2000, they kept growing. Last couple of years, they've actually started to shrink back down because of the amount of deregulation that we've done in the state. So promoting, and the party I know tries to promote that as much as they can. The question is the media picking that up and pushing that out too. Because I know every time I've been with the governor in a public place and he spoke, that's one of the first things he says is we are the second state in the country as it relates to job creation and economic development. We're ranked second. And that's usually how he starts out his comments. But whether it gets reported in the newspaper or not or in the media, then that's another. We actually completely, you have to be over, I think it's $500,000 or more. No, it's amount of people.
It's 50,000.
Yeah. There's no personal income tax in the state of Florida at all. And we've slowly taken steps to completely do away with the business income tax in the state of Florida, but it only relates to S corps. No, I'm sorry, C corps. So it only relates to C corps. So if you have an LLC, you don't pay business income taxes, which I think it's like 90% of businesses in the state of Florida are LLCs or limited partnerships or S corps. Only the C corps, and I could be getting that wrong, but it's only one classification of corporations, your big companies, that are actually being required to pay that, and we've ratcheted that down every year to decrease that. And I think it's only at $1 billion now of income, and you'll continue to see that. We as a legislature have taken steps every year to continue to reduce that, because that is one impediment to your bigger businesses coming to the state. And I will tell you this, another quick thing. I've looked at a bill, and this relates to realtors as well. We are the only state in the country that requires people to pay sales tax on commercial leases. Did you know that? It's $2 billion a year that comes to the state. Why? What better way to encourage small business growth than to reduce taxes as it relates to commercial leases that we pay? You don't pay it on residential leases. You only pay it on commercial. So that's one of the things, a bill was filed last year to do away with that. It's a big price tag, so we're going to look at trying to do that. That bill will be filed again this year, either by Representative O'Toole or myself, and to make sure that that's another step to reduce the tax burden on our small businesses and help them be successful. So with that, I think we're
done. But the manufacturing equipment tax is being eliminated as well, which was the other big, I think, accomplishment this year, that you pay intangible tax if you buy equipment for your plant or facility, and that's being phased out. So it just encourages people to reinvest, or businesses and manufacturers to reinvest in their equipment and their technology and infrastructure to provide a product. So
it was a bill that was introduced last year by Representative O'Toole. I have actually spoken with her in her office to see if she's going to file it again. If she doesn't file it again, I'm looking to file it myself. And there's two different ways that we're looking at doing it. The last bill that was just a complete repeal, but it was ratcheted back a percentage every year. So it would take 6 years, because it's a big fiscal impact on the state. It's a $2 billion fiscal impact. So slowly ratcheting that back. Another approach that we may look at doing is doing a bill every year just for 1%. So every year you file an individual bill. That way it's not a big fiscal impact to the state all at once, because they still look at the 6-year impact of $2 billion to the state. If you file it as a percentage of time, then it's a much less fiscal impact, and we may be able to get it passed and just file it every year. Well, thank you very much for having us. I'm sure Jim and I will be around if you guys have questions, and thanks for your time.